remember this thing. It's called a DVD. And for a little while in the late 2010s, it was one of the most popular physical media formats of all time. People would go to a store, pick out a movie they wanted to watch, then take it home, put it into their DVD player, enjoy the movie, and then return it or trade it in for another one. What a concept. But if you had been watching Netflix throughout that decade, you might have seen something else. A small red button at the bottom of your screen that said, "Watch." Instant, that red button changed everything. So how exactly did Netflix become such a huge streaming service with over 200 million paid subscribers worldwide? Well, here's the history of Netflix. It all started back in 1997 when two men named Reed Hastings and Mark Randall came together to start an online DVD rental service. The idea was to cut out the middleman of physical video stores like Blockbuster and deliver DVDs directly to people's homes via the United States Postal Service. But that wasn't exactly original. Several other companies were already doing that. So Hastings and Randolph decided to throw a wrench into the formula by introducing something called a flat rental fee. Instead of charging customers different prices for different movies or different membership tiers, Netflix charged everyone the same price for every movie in their catalog. It didn't matter if you wanted to watch Gone with the Wind or Titanic. It cost the same. This made Netflix more appealing than its competitors because customers knew that they could watch whatever they wanted without being surprised by a high price tag. But it also put a serious strain on the company's profits. Eventually, Hastings and Randolph realized that they needed to do something drastic to turn things around. So they introduced a monthly subscription model instead of a per-rental model. For a flat fee, customers could rent as many DVDs as they wanted each month with no due dates. This turned out to be a genius move because it allowed customers to use the service however they wanted without feeling pressured to return the DVDs right away. As a result, Netflix became extremely popular very quickly. By the end of 2003, they had accumulated over 1 million customers, which is equivalent to roughly 1% of the entire US DVD market. But not everyone was happy about this. A few years earlier, Netflix had actually filed a patent for their recommendation algorithm, which suggested movies to users based on what other people who shared similar taste profiles had watched. But in 2006, they were denied because the USPTO deemed that algorithms aren't patentable. However, that didn't stop Netflix from trying. They filed an appeal, but it was rejected. So they decided to file a lawsuit against the USPTO, and in 2012, their efforts finally paid off when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that software can be patented under the right circumstances. But while all that was going on, Netflix had bigger problems to deal with. Blockbuster had noticed what was happening, and they tried desperately to adapt. In 2005, they launched their own streaming service called Blockbuster On Demand. And in 2008, they even bought a company called Cinema Now to bolster their streaming selection. But none of it mattered. Blockbuster had a bloated business model that relied on expensive retail locations and late fees, which gave Netflix a huge advantage. Even after their patent was approved in 2013, it was too late. Netflix had already grown so large that Blockbuster couldn't compete. They filed for bankruptcy in 2010 and eventually closed down all their retail locations. Today, Blockbuster only exists as a joke on social media. But while Netflix was killing Blockbuster, they were also taking on someone else, Hulu. Hulu was a streaming service founded by several major media companies, including NBC Universal, Fox, and Disney. When it first launched in 2007, it was ad-supported and free, but in 2010, they introduced a paid subscription option that cost $7.99 per month. At first, this seemed like a good idea because it opened up a new revenue stream for Hulu and made their service more competitive with Netflix. But as time went on, it became clear that there was a problem. Hulu was designed to simply be an online extension of television. Their shows and movies were locked behind a paywall and only available to U.S. viewers, which meant that they never had the same level of popularity as Netflix. So in order to stay afloat, Hulu had to rely on their parent companies for financial support. To this day, they still do that, although it doesn't seem to bother viewers too much. After all, it's how they got their hands on the streaming rights to the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. But back in the early 2010s, Netflix was on a mission to produce their own shows and movies. One of their first original series was House of Cards, which premiered in 2013. It was based on a political thriller of the same name that aired on the BBC back in the 1990s. But the new version was darker and more violent, which made it a hit with Netflix viewers. Other hits followed, including Orange is the New Black, which premiered later that year. These original series were important because they showed that Netflix could produce high-quality content that rivaled traditional television networks. But they were also risky because the company had never produced anything like them before. If they flopped, it would reflect poorly on the company and discourage other viewers from signing up. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And today, Netflix has a long list of award-winning original series, including Stranger Things, The Crown, and Squid Game. But not everyone is a fan of Netflix originals. Many people prefer to watch movies and shows that have already been released because it gives them more freedom. If they don't like the latest episode of Stranger Things, they can always wait until the next one comes out. They do want to have to sit through an entire season like they would if it were on network television, but this preference has caused some issues for Netflix. For example, many people complained when they removed Friends from their service in 2020 because it forced them to sign up for another streaming service called HBO Max just to watch Monica and Chandler get married. Similarly, many people are upset today because Netflix doesn't have the streaming rights to the Harry Potter franchise. Instead, the rights are held by Peacock, which is a streaming service owned by Comcast. This has forced some people to sign up for multiple streaming services, which is starting to become a problem. In fact, 55% of Americans say that they have too many streaming services right now. That means that nearly 1 in 2 people are paying money to access content that they never even watched. Some people are trying to fight back against this trend by canceling their subscriptions, but that's becoming harder to do as well. You see, streaming services have figured out a way to make it difficult to cancel accounts. They schedule phone calls with customer service representatives, ask customers to jump through hoops on their website, or even offer discounts just to keep people subscribed. But despite these challenges, the number of streaming subscriptions has continued to grow. There are now dozens of services to choose from, including Apple TV, Disney+, Paramount+, and Amazon Prime Video. This makes it difficult for people to find the content that they want to watch, not to mention the rising cost of living. With inflation at an all-time high, people are cutting back on discretionary spending, which includes subscriptions. That's why Netflix implemented a crackdown on password sharing in May of 2023. They sent emails to millions of users informing them that they needed to either upgrade their account or start their own separate account. It's a controversial move that will likely alienate some customers, but it's also a necessary one if the company wants to stay afloat. In fact, Netflix has been focusing heavily on growth lately because they face a lot of competition from other streaming services. In April, they announced that they would be adding video games to their platform, which seems like a strange move. After all, video games have nothing to do with streaming movies and shows. But Netflix has a history of making bold moves that seem strange at first, like producing their own content or cracking down on password sharing. It's unclear whether or not video games will be a hit with customers, but one thing is for sure, Netflix isn't going anywhere anytime soon. All right, everyone, that's a look at the history of Netflix. Big thanks to our supporters for making videos like this one possible. And shout out to our supporters for making videos like this one possible. If you want to learn how I make videos like these, let me know by tapping the link in the comment. And as always, thank you so much for watching.